I was recently watching some YouTube videos and I was recommended a video from a channel called Michelle's Acquiring Spanish. And in this video, it is about a 1-year results of using Dreaming Spanish. And as someone who enjoys Spanish and has dabbled in Spanish, I wanted to kind of jump into this and see what was going on. But underneath this results and review kind of using Dreaming Spanish, there was a lot of really valid and valuable information, but one specific part that I really want to talk about.
I always say it's like I'm comparing myself to, someone's like production rather than the backstage. And like backstage is where everything happens. Backstage is the journey, right? Like we see I see the destination as like, oh, the productions that put on in front of me, but like, what did it take for that production to happen? Like there's so many things that I'm not gonna ever see, so it's just best just to focus on me.
So as I continue my story arc of trying to be someone who just wants everyone to enjoy language learning and not having these wild standards, well, I understand why standards are there. Also, just get into it and enjoy it. I find myself making this video. The idea that honestly, a lot of times stuff that you see on camera isn't necessarily always the truth. Even people who are trying to present the truth sometimes may sugarcoat a little bit of information. Part of the reason that I don't script videos is because I want everything to be off the cuff, just everything emotionally natural and not try to spice up stuff. I've said this before. I don't want to make a video and be like, oh, I do 10 cards a day and then be like, oh man, that doesn't really sound good. Let me pump this up to 15. No one would know. I try to have everything just as open as possible. That way, someone out there can see the benefit from it. So the idea that she's talking about is seeing everybody from a production standpoint. It's just like anything that you see on YouTube. This video included is the final product of a little bit of research or a little bit of watching a video and then presenting something in a way. You don't see the behind the scenes. You guys aren't going to see the process that I went through to edit this video, adding if I add music or if I add overlays and some sort of screen stuff. You're not going to see that process. You're just seeing the final video, and language learning is very much just like that. You're seeing the final results. And even if you see someone who spent 1,000 hours watching Dreaming Spanish videos or whatever they're watching, you're still seeing the final product. And just because you see 1,000 hours doesn't quite tell you the full story as to what's going on, because unless they're specifically talking about it, you don't know if that 1,000 hours is on top of also reading a bunch, speaking with native speakers, visiting the country. Do you live in an environment where that is a prevalent language that is being spoken? There's all kinds of factors that go into this, but you're not seeing that because that is the behind the scenes. I love language learning content. It's about all that I watch. I still watch it. I love it. I had my little bit of break from language stuff earlier this year, but as I continue to get deeper into it, I've never truly went away from it, and I genuinely love it. And I do think you can watch these videos, and I think you should watch these videos because a lot of them are motivating, but also keep in mind that person's situation is different than yours. How often are they doing it? How much are they doing it a day? What are they doing? But also, you just may not have the time that they have, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that in language learning and in this language community, there's a lot of people that have built up this idea that if you don't study every single day, you're a failure, you don't care about the language, or if you're not spending at least 5 hours on it, then you're never going to make progress. And listen, that's just not true. Now, are you going to make as quick a progress as someone who is studying for 5 hours a day and you're studying 30 minutes? Absolutely not. And at 30 minutes a day, your progress is it's going to be slower. It doesn't mean that you can't get there. It's just going to be slower. And that is what's happening. You're not a failure at language learning. You're not a failure at being able to learn a language. It's taking longer just because your exposure to the language has not happened as fast. If you're trying to learn how to sew and you have someone who goes to class and they're learning for 2 to 3 hours a day working on sewing and stitch patterns and stuff like that, and you're spending 10 minutes, you're going to learn. It's just going to take a substantially longer time just because time put in is generally how you improve things. And so I constantly see people comparing themselves to others. Oh, I can't believe that you're this good, or I can't believe you're this bad. But it also doesn't tell the full story, because a lot of times when people edit videos, they're going to edit out any ums and things like that. For example, that just there. But I think that it's important to watch those for motivation, as I mentioned earlier, but don't compare yourself to that person. I know that's easier said than done. I've been really adamant about trying to shut down all these super negative thoughts in language learning. I've tweeted about them and stuff like that. There's a guy that I follow who had tweeted a long time ago that if you're not if you don't spend at least a little bit of time every day learning a language, then you truly don't care about it. And I think that that's one of the worst takes maybe ever. I still think Eric's a great dude, but that's a terrible take. And I think a lot of these takes can also just set up a negative mentality. And I'm not saying that there's people that's trying to gatekeep the language community or anything like that, but I do think that there's also this idea, especially in some of the harder languages, I think there's this idea that I'm learning a tough language, and so I almost want this to be mine, so you can't do it. And there's almost like the spread of negativity just to simply say that, oh, you can't do it. Because there's so many people that think that language learning is a talent, and I'm here to tell you it is not. I am the most untalented human being that has ever lived, and that's factual. That's in some sort of book somewhere statistically. And if I can get to a point to where I can survive on a boat in Ecuador only in Spanish, you can too, okay? That's just 100% facts. But with watching this stuff, we always put added pressures on ourselves. Oh man, should I be consuming native material? Is it bad to consume videos like Dreaming Spanish because they're technically teaching even though they're native material? Listen, no one cares. Just spend time with the language. I know there's always these arguments of, should you use teaching materials like graded readers, or should you just jump into native content? Listen, there's a reason for all this stuff. Graded readers, I don't think are inherently bad, because graded readers are there for the purpose of saying your vocabulary is not as developed. Here's a kind of condensed version. Now, as a way a native speaker would speak, I guess that's up for debate, but it can get you used to words and stuff like that as you're going on. I've noticed when I've watched Dreaming Spanish lately, the beginner videos, I understand like it's borderline 99 to 100%. I went up to an intermediate video and I understood about 70% of it. So there's still room to improve, but if I watch content that's a little bit easier, I don't have to think about it. I can watch it just like I'm watching content in English, and the repetition of those verbs and nouns and adjectives and all that stuff, it's just embedding in my head. And the point behind that is, again, if I told you that I was watching Spanish content and I understood 99% of it, if I leave out that little detail of that being like beginner videos and not up to intermediate, it also makes me sound further, which in turn makes someone have an imposter syndrome of someone else. Well, man, they're understanding 99% of Spanish. Why am I not? Or they're understanding 99% of this language. Why am I not understanding that in Japanese or Chinese or Russian or Mongolian, whatever you're doing? And it's because of the information that would be left out. So I've not even watched an advanced video. I'm sure that would be brutal. It'd be very humbling, but also I'm not overly concerned about it because advanced topics are like politics and stuff, and I think that's garbage anyway. And then there's other added pressures, like the idea of putting your phone in a language. Oh man, let's do this, which I will never do, and I have a very specific reason for that. There's this like weird superiority complex behind people who are like, my phone is in Japanese, my phone is in Thai. Great, that's fantastic. I have specific reasoning for not doing that, and that is because one time my mom had a stroke, and they had to contact the family, which they couldn't even get into her phone because she had a passcode on it. But it made me think about how if something were to happen to me and I was in an area where I needed them to contact my family via my phone, text messaging or whatever. And listen, I know there's pictures on it. It's just in a situation like that, if you're talking a few extra seconds to figure out where something's at or how to type this or change a keyboard, sometimes extra seconds can matter. And I just thought, after my mom had that stroke, I said, nah, dude, I'm never putting my phone in another language. Just because. So is that stupid? I don't care. That's my own personal reason. And I think that you should do what makes you happy, which is kind of the point of basically everything that I talk about now anyway. And so we have to stop feeding into these just ideas, right? Let's be ourselves. It doesn't matter. I have a family. I can't have my phone in another language. I can't watch TV for 25 hours a day, which is what some people would probably tell you they do. I have nothing against the people that do that. I think it's great. If you have the time to do that, I think it's great. But I also think that comparing yourself to someone who doesn't have a job or doesn't have school or doesn't have anything like that, and they can spend 8 to 10 to 12 to 14 hours a day watching stuff, that's great. But don't compare yourself studying 30 minutes a day to the dude that's doing 12 hours a day. It's not going to work well. And it's not because you're dumb, as I mentioned earlier. It's because you aren't spending the same amount of time, and that doesn't make you a bad person. It's because you don't have the time, and there's nothing wrong with that. Language learning is a hobby. It's so weird to me that if you're a fan of basketball, like, it's so common knowledge that, yeah, Kobe Bryant was so awesome. When I watched him play, he was such an incredible player. But, like, when I would go shoot basketball or I would play, I was never like, man, I'm not as good as Kobe Bryant. And it's just because, yeah, obviously, that's his job. He eats, sleeps, and breathes basketball. That's what he was paid for, which I guess would feed into it being a job. And he worked on it for hours, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. I don't. And it was never confusion. But when it comes to language learning, that's like the big thing. Everybody's like, where's he? He's at 500 hours and he's doing what? He's speaking? Uh-oh, I'm a failure. you're not a failure, man. You're not a failure. I encourage everybody to just try to be happy in language learning with where they're at. No one's ever going to be fully satisfied. I think everybody's always going to think that they're farther ahead than where they are. I think we should build up positive mentality and positive stuff. I'm not saying that you can't be part of a community, an immersion community, or a book study, whatever. Do what makes you happy. Just stop comparing yourself to other people who are showing you the stage production and not the behind the scenes. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. And I do think that you can watch these videos, and I think you should watch these videos, because